There's Caroline. Hi, Caroline. Hi, Eve. I think I can see you, or you may be frozen. I can't hear anything. Hmm. Can you all hear me? Yes? Okay. For some reason, I can't.
Eve, can you test your microphone? Maybe Eve is frozen. Oh,
Is it working?
oh, there you are. Oh, and then she is gone. Okay. Here's Eve. It's back. I know Harrison said that he was going to be here.
Is it working now?
There we are. Yep. I can hear you. Can everyone else hear Eve? Yeah. Awesome. So we're waiting on a couple different people. I know Harrison said that he was coming from swim practice. Probably feels most likely, knowing Harrison. There's Hans. I think Christopher should also be joining us. Hey, Hans. Awesome. Well, welcome. My setup is getting kind of weird right now, and I don't really know why. Probably just Zoom fatigue from my computer. But it's good to see you all. We have a very special guest today. It's Hans Aguilar. Sorry, not Hans, Hansel Aguilar. I was looking at Hans. Mr. Aguilar is with the, I guess you all changed their acronym, right? Because it used to be like the PCRB, Police Civilian Review Board. And then do you all have a new acronym now?
Yes, it's going to be PCOB in March.
Okay. Cool. Well, welcome. So Hansel will be able to tell us all about the PCOB and kind of like their role, because they are also another city commission, just like us, but focused on police and civilian review. And so, yeah, so he's going to explain a lot more about that. But in the meantime, I'd love for you all to introduce yourselves, and we'll continue that as we get more people to join back in. We can start with Zanaya or Anaya. Which do you prefer, Zanaya or Anaya?
Naya, but either is fine.
Okay, I'll remember Naya. Just want to make sure.
My name is Naya Bryant. I'm a student at CHS. I'm in 10th grade, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. We can do Caroline.
Yeah, I'm Caroline. I'm a senior at CHS, and I'm glad to be here also.
And Hans.
Hi, I'm Hans, senior at Finance. Yeah, I'm glad to be here tonight.
Very nice. So Hansel, if you want, you can go ahead and kind of like let us know why you're here. Oh, and also just let you all know, we have pretty exciting news. There are 10 attendees inside of our session today, which is pretty cool. These are prospective youth council members. So they were interested in youth council and wanted to learn more about what we do. So yes, so hi to all of our attendees. I'm glad you all joined us. Eve, you are back. Welcome. Eve, if you would like, could you introduce yourself if you can hear us, and then yes. It may be a bit for Eve. Okay. We're gonna wait. Hanzo, you can go ahead and get started. I'll see if Eve can put it in the chat.
All right. Well, Happy New Year's, guys. Thank you for having me. Again, my name is Hansel Aguilar. My role with the city of Charlottesville is the executive director of the Police Civilian Review Board, which is soon to be the Police Civilian Oversight Board. And I just wanted to just come here and make sure that all of our community members are being made aware of what this board is, what it does, its history, and particularly our youth. You're our future. And there, I think that you have something unique to provide to us in this discussion about police oversight and police accountability. So I prepared a PowerPoint presentation, and I wanted to make it as interactive as possible. So I'll be asking you questions, but I am mindful of the time, so I understand if for whatever reason you don't want to answer, I'll just move along. So I'll go ahead and make sure. Let's see. Okay, and you can see the slideshow. Okay. I'll take that, the dog barking, as an acknowledgement.
Yes.
Let me see. Okay. 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 Again, it's the Police Civilian Oversight Board, and that they actually just passed the amendments to the ordinance or the city law that changed its operation. So we'll go into that a little bit later. Again, my name is Hansel Aguilar, and I'm the executive director. So these are the few questions I'd like for us to kind of tackle and to address in this presentation today. What is civilian oversight of law enforcement? Who says we need it? Why should I care? When did it get here, and how does it look like? And where can I find more information about it? And I'm not sure in your curriculum or in elsewhere if you've been exposed to Latin, but you'll see a quote to the left in the blue, or my left, I don't know if it's your left, but it says quis custodiet ipsos custodes. And I'm not sure, has anybody ever heard that phrase before? Okay. In a very rough translation, it means who will watch the watchman. And this is something, a quote, that's a question that's been grappled since antiquity. Who, when we have individuals watching over us, who oversees them? And that's the essence of civilian oversight, if I could summarize it. Police officers have an awesome power within our society, and that awesome power needs to be checked by civilians. And that's the theme of civilian oversight. But let's get a little bit more into it. Before this presentation, had anybody heard of the concept of civilian oversight of law enforcement? Okay, good. Daniel, I saw you. Civilian oversight, as I mentioned, the premise or the theme behind it is to make sure that we are allowing the community members, civilians, people outside of the police department to make sure that the police is doing what they're entrusted to do, to serve and protect. As we know, in this country and elsewhere as well, other places around the world, there have been incidents in patterns and systemic practices where police have not always upheld their duty to serve and protect. And some members of our community have been more impacted by that. Members of communities of color, members of particular gender orientations, members of youth, and just there's a wide spectrum of different individuals that have faced police misconduct or other police injustices. So the concept of making sure that we have individuals overseeing police activities, it's been around for about 100 years or so in different iterations throughout this 100 years or so in the US. I'm talking specifically. It has strengthened and has evolved in different versions. I'd say right now we're at a place in the country where we're seeing a lot of activity behind police reform and civilian oversight of law enforcement. Now, to tackle the question, who says we need it? Does anybody have an idea who would kind of pose this question, or who would make this decision in our society, or about why we need, who says we need something like civilian oversight? Okay, so community, Daniel, what are you gonna say?
No, that's what I was gonna say. I think that maybe the question may come from if there's a police officer that says like, you know, why would you need to oversight for me? Like I do good, or everyone that I know is a good police officer. But I think that there's are real questions and concerns from community members and people that are affected and being put through the criminal justice system.
Perfect. Thank you for that. So, right, the community members are a big impetus, a big factor into mobilizing the question on civilian oversight. And in the case of Charlottesville, the community has been very active and in engaging in these discussions. Even some former youth council members or alumni of youth council have been involved in this question of civilian oversight here in the city, and were very instrumental to push the city council to create a civilian oversight body. The state legislators, they also have an input. They create the laws into this discussion. After the murder of George Floyd, this was a topic that the Virginia Assembly looked into closely. Okay, what are we going to do about criminal justice and police issues here in Virginia? Prior to 2020, the law regarding civilian oversight was very ambiguous. It wasn't clear whether the state law allowed for civilian oversight. You had 1 or 2 jurisdictions around the state that had some form of it. But after 2020, it was a game changer. There was a special session in the summer, and the legislatures came together and they said, hey, we need a stronger civilian oversight here. We believe that this is something that's positive and can create the kind of relationships we want to see between the community and the police. So they implemented a lot of different laws aimed at criminal justice reform. And it, which is one of the reasons why we now have a stronger board within the city. And some community members from Charlottesville were also instrumental at the state level. They were lobbying, they were contacting the representatives and making sure that they knew at the state level that the community members wanted this. And the city council, which is the legislative body locally, they're the ones that create the laws here. They were listening to the community, they were engaging in the discussions, and they ultimately say, yes, we need some version of it here. And we'll talk a little bit about the timeline of how it's involved within the city. And feel free to ask me any questions immediately, or we could wait to the end, whatever you prefer.
Do you know what youth counselors were involved in the, or like former youth council alumni?
So one in particular, Ms. Bryant was involved. She wrote a very passionate letter to the city council after that went along with the initial PCRB, the initial Police Civilian Review Board, and she advocated for that we have a strong civilian oversight here in the city.
Cool.
Okay, so why should you care? You know, some of you may or may not have contact with the police, or your friends may or may not have, but ultimately, whenever we have any issues within the government, it's really something that impacts us all. So whether you're directly impacted in in a negative police encounter, or whether a friend, or whether you're disconnected from a particular incident, it still impacts you. For one, you pay taxes, even if you work or don't work, your parents do. So you're contributing to a system in that way. And also you're going to be future voters, and it's important for you to be engaged in these processes. More specifically though, within the city of Charlottesville, there have been discussions about negative patterns impacting particular communities in a negative way. But there were a few studies that looked at this closely. In one of them was the DMC study, as it's called, the disproportionate minority contact study. And that is a phenomenon it exists everywhere. It's established empirical fact now that there are individuals that have a higher propensity, a higher likelihood to be negatively impacted by the criminal justice system. And they call that the disproportionate minority contact. So individuals from minority communities are disproportionately more impacted by the justice system. Specifically in the study that they did with youth in the city, they found that based on the data, based on all data from multiple sources, Black youth were substantially overrepresented at the referral for intake stage based on what would be expected given the percentage of Black youth living in the city of Charlottesville. So the people that were the youth, the Black youth in the city that were referred to the justice system, it did not match up with the percentage of the youth in the city of Charlottesville. Black youth were more likely to be arrested as a result of a call for service from a resident from an officer initiated arrest. So, and that just means that there were some police officers come into contact with individuals in different ways. Sometimes they self-initiate interactions. Sometimes their interactions are caused by a community member contacted the police. What this statistics is saying that the black youth in the city were more likely to be arrested when a community member contacted the police. And that's also something that needs to be looked at closely. Another finding was that Black youth were more likely compared to white youth to have multiple referrals for intake and multiple arrests. So in some of these, another statistics could be looked at more closely in the DMC youth study. This is a very gentle introduction to these issues. I'm not going to go into length, but feel free, if you have any questions about it, we could talk about it here, or after the presentation, feel free to contact me. We could talk a little bit more about it. Okay, now a brief timeline of how we got here. As we all know, if you live in Charlottesville, I'm a newcomer to Charlottesville, but 2017 was a very pivotal year in the recent history of Charlottesville. We have what's now referred to as the Summer of Hate. And in that rally, a lot of issues were exposed within the city of Charlottesville. And there was a call for a lot of reform efforts, for a lot of making changes onto how we were operating within the city and what different agencies and institutions needed to be looked at more closely. Within those discussions was a call for the police department to be looked at more closely, more critically. At that time in 2017, there was no civilian oversight of the law enforcement. There was an advisory panel, which many police departments have. They have 4 or 5 community members that meet closely with the chief. But usually those meetings aren't really public, and no one really, not much public discussion is had about what's going on there and what recommendations they have. Civilian oversight is more systematic and is more public in that regard. They put public reports and they have public forums and discussions. So they asked the community members who identified this as an issue, they called on to city council to look at the establishment of a civilian oversight board, which the police civilian review board. And the city council established initially what was called the initial PCRB, the initial police civilian review board. And their role was to research what options do we have as a city? How do we get involved in this a little bit more? And what kind of civilian oversight body should we establish here? Because there are many options and they look different. They have different powers, different abilities. And the city council wanted to know, well, let's look at this more critically. We'll go ahead and appoint some community members who will meet, who will research, we'll give them some money to be able to train and to look at this closely. And at the end of, or excuse me, in the spring of 2019, or the summer of 2019, that initial PCRB gave a report to city council, and they said, we do need a civilian oversight board, civilian oversight or civilian review board, and we need to give them different powers, some of them to include auditing, investigations of police misconduct, and reviewing of the budgets. At that time, city council took the report in 2019 and they said, okay, we're gonna adopt some of your recommendations, but not all of them. So they established the PCRB, which is currently operating from 2019 till the end of February. It'll close off that chapter and we'll have the PCOB. But the PCRB has been around now for 2 years, and their role is to review investigations of internal affairs. So anywhere in the country, whether they have civilian oversight or not, if you have an issue with with a police officer or police department, you can file a complaint, and they have a department. It's usually called internal affairs, and they have individuals that'll look at the issue, and they will look at the complaint, and then they would put forth some findings, whether the police acted inappropriately or whether the police acted correctly. For many reasons, community members feel like that's not really a fair system if police get to investigate themselves, which is why we have this mechanism of civilian oversight. So this is the model that we currently have, which is a review model. They can't investigate, but they can review investigations that internal affairs completed. Now, this issue, when the 2020 law came into effect, the community members engaged again in this process and say, hey, city council, in 2019, you were saying that the state didn't give you the authority, but now with this 2020 law, now we do have the authority, we want the powers. So they spent pretty much all of 2021 discussing this, and at the December meeting of the last meeting of the year, 2021, city council made significant amendments to the current law in the city, and now established the Police Civilian Oversight Board, and that's going to be come into effect in March of this year. And I apologize, that was a lot. I'm going to go through some of the powers and to give you some visuals of what this looks like. Okay, so this is an organizational chart that may or may not interest you, but at the top, the city of Charlottesville residents, you are always at the top of any public and democratic system. The voters are the ones that have the power. And so we have the city of Charlottesville residents who elect the city council. The city council, in turn, then they hire a city manager. We have a system where we have a weak mayor system, and that's how it's referred in this particular city, which means that usually a lot of the decisions are made by the city manager, who's a paid staff member, as opposed to the elected city council and the mayor. So the city, under the city manager, there are deputy city managers. We have Mr. Samuel Sanders, who's a deputy city manager, and my direct supervisors, Ms. Ashley Reynolds Marshall. And in between there also, we have the acting chief of police, who's also directly hired by the city manager. And that's kind of the hierarchy within the city manager. As you can see, I fall, Hansel Aguilar is the executive director, I fall under the deputy city manager in terms of the staff, but I also report to the board. So the city council appoints 7 board members to fulfill the mission of the board. And those board members work alongside me and have some oversight capacity of me as a staff member. and I report to them and to the city manager. And under my structure, in able to do my duties as the executive director, I'm building a team right now because we don't have enough data or sufficient data to know how many complaints there are. We're going to be working with pools rather than hiring a specific person, a full-time employee, part-time employee. We're going to have pool of people to call on to whenever we have to have an investigation or a hearing. So we're going to have some hearing officers, some investigators. I am looking into hiring an administrative assistant, and we're going to have mediators as well, being have a pool of mediators. I've been in conversations with UVA and I just finalized a work study contract, so we could hopefully bring some UVA students to assist with the work that we do. If you know any UVA students, we would love to have them and have be part of the team. And also interns, whether they're college interns or through the high school program, the internship program that we have here at the city, we definitely welcome them. I've been in conversations and with the facilitation, Daniel, he gave me a lot of good leads. So I'm trying to put that together. Hopefully we get some summer interns and start that program. Okay. These are some of the, and just being conscious of time, just gonna run right through what the powers. So as I mentioned before, they could only review investigations of internal affairs. Now, under the new ordinance, the amendments to the ordinance, they're going to actually be able to investigate, which is one of the big, most significant powers of this. And they can investigate some serious issues like use of force issues, or death or serious injury. We thank God we don't have this is not a jurisdiction where we experience a lot of issues where there's deadly force used by police. There are some jurisdictions around the country where that is a significant issue, but that is something that this board will be allowed to do. They're also going to be able to look at practices and policies, be able to audit. They're going to be able to recommend cases to mediation. In my experience, mediation has been something very powerful when in appropriate cases of building those relationships. I've done this work in Washington, D.C. and in Fairfax County. And in DC specifically, we sent a lot of cases to mediation where we were able to resolve them in a very positive way, where the community member was able to communicate to the officer why they felt disrespected in an encounter, and the officer was able to listen in a more neutral setting that was facilitated by a mediator. So those are the kind of tools that this board is going to have, and I think are going to be important. Okay, so the DMC study, and I can share this presentation with Daniel, so you have this information readily available. But the DMC study is actually posted on the Charlottesville website. They did a youth study, which is probably going to be up for reviews. It's been almost 10 years now. I think 2014 they published it, so we should probably do a 10-year update to that. And they have an adult study as well that's a little bit more recent. And the Civilian Review Board or Civilian Oversight Board website, it's listed there as well. The phone number for the office is there, and that's the email contact. We're happy to take any questions that you may have. And I really, again, I just want to make sure that all of our community members know about this important tool, especially our youth. That you're engaged in these issues and that you're bringing forth any problems that you may have come across. And again, some jurisdictions utilize this system more than others. Every jurisdiction, every city, community is different. In Charlottesville, this has been identified as something that community members want to see more of. In improving these police relations, and that's what we're trying to do here with this work. I'm happy to take any questions or to go over anything else that you may have questions about.
I have a question.
Yes.
So like I know you said that like in your process you do like mediation or whatever with the officer and then like people from your board. But how do you assure that like the officer's not going to repeat the behavior or the thing that they did when they're not being overlooked or when they're out in the communities?
That's an excellent question. So in the way that we've done it, and one piece of this is that the ordinance or the amendments to the ordinance were written, but now there's still more work to be done. We need to do our procedures, our operating procedures, and they're going to be really crucial. And this particular question that you asked, Ryan, is going to be important because how much mediation is enough, and how you can't send the same officer to mediation 10 times. At that point, they're probably not getting it. So the way that we've done this and in other places have done this, um, you send them to mediation. You pick a number. The way we did in DC, to my recollection, it was 2 times within a 12-month period of a similar offense. If they have another offense, then at that point, that the mediation is not gonna be something that you explore and you go directly through the investigation. I do want to also to understand that in mediation, so the board members are not going to be part of the mediation process. And the reason is because, and I'm not going to be part of the mediation process. The reason is because I might have some duties to investigate matters. So it's important for me to be impartial. There are going to be cases where we send a case to mediation and the parties are dissatisfied. And they're going to say, nope, I don't feel comfortable with this. Go ahead and continue the investigation. So we'll continue the investigation. And it's important that I was not involved in the mediation part and neither the board members, because the board members are also going to review the complete investigation and make a decision. But within our procedures, and I know I'm giving you a long-winded answer, but within our procedures, we're gonna look at how many complaints, what the number, the threshold is gonna be to how many complaints we could send to mediation for a particular officer. And not all cases are appropriate for mediation. There are some allegations that are just too egregious and the officers have body-worn camera. So we're going to have a preliminary review. And if the preliminary review shows that this is not going to be a good case for mediation, we just won't send it to mediation. So those are the kind of decisions we have to make.
And I have one more question.
Sure.
How do you guys like get out to the community that you're like here for them or that they can like come to you guys if they have a case or something comes up that happens like this? Because I feel like not a lot of residents in Charlottesville know that they can come to the PCRB or the PCO, whatever it is now. I don't think enough people know that they can come to you guys and like talk to you or that you guys can handle their situations like that. And I also don't think that enough people are comfortable with that. I mean, like with the record of our city council and our police department, I don't think people are comfortable with that.
And I appreciate those questions, and those are very important concerns that you have. There is a national association, an umbrella organization that many organizations of civilian oversight belong to. It's called NACO, the National Association of Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. I've been a member of NACO since 2016, and I go to their annual meeting and regularly. And we engage in these issues. Community and public outreach is a really big component of our work. It doesn't matter how strong the city council puts on paper that the board is going to be. If people don't know about it, there's no, you're just wasting money, so to speak. And one of the things that we this year's national conference, the theme was civilian oversight as a permanent part of oversight of law enforcement. Or yeah, it's a permanent feature, something like that. But essentially that we're here to stay. And in doing and in being here to stay means that we have to do some outreach. NACO, one of the staff members said that after the George Floyd murder, they've received significant traffic, email traffic, phone phone calls about what community members could do. And in some cases, individuals from cities that already have civilian oversight were calling and saying, we need civilian oversight in the city. And then the staff member had to say, well, you actually have civilian oversight. You may want to get in contact with them. And I think that that was an example and a call to action for us as civilian oversight practitioners that, hey, maybe we're not doing a good job with outreach. This board is relatively young, but that's still not an excuse. I have been putting together a program, or outreach program, to make sure community members know about this. I've been in contact with, the youth council. It is having this presentation to you was important for me. I've been in conversation with the school system. I'm going to go. We have a slot with NBC where we can have a showcase of what we do, and I'll be going in February. So I'm trying to identify different ways and mechanisms by which we can do the outreach to the community. Of course, right now we're also hindered somewhat because of COVID restrictions, but that's still not an excuse. But we are getting and working on getting the word out there. And hopefully now you, after you listen to this presentation, you will work with your neighbors or your contacts and let them know, hey, we have this system here. But the other part of your concern was about how do you get people to trust us? And I think that that is a very crucial point that every civilian oversight body has to consider. And you have to do the correct work. You have to show individuals that this system works. And that's not an overnight thing. You have to work on that. When you put forth the reports to the community, you have to make sure that they're thorough reports, that they're showing that you did the work as a board, that you considered all these issues, that you're bringing forth recommendations to actually impact change. So it's something that has to take a lot of work. Unfortunately, also within the city, you do have some, like you mentioned, there are people that don't know about the Civilian Oversight Board, but some members do know about it. And unfortunately, there have been some incidents that have caused some controversy. So we're trying to overcome these kind of incidents and have a better reputation within the community.
I have a question.
Sure.
So like this, we know that like the policing situation in the city of Charlottesville is quite special because we not only have the city department of police, city police department, but we also have this university police, and we have noticed. I've noticed like there are like the university police department is kind of expanding its presence, especially in the beyond the grounds into the corner area. So just curious, like, is this like, well, that system, like the university police system, also fall under like the oversight of this board?
You guys have some excellent questions. So that's actually a really good question that came up when they were amending the new city ordinance, or when they were amending the existing city ordinance. And the delegate Hudson, who represents our area, she was actually one of the promoters of this oversight law at the state level. And she weighed in on it, and she said, when they envisioned this law of civilian oversight, they definitely had campus community in the mind, that there should be some oversight. The issue that isn't really worked out well is that usually the civilian oversight bodies have jurisdiction of the police department that is within their jurisdiction. So really UVA is separate, as you mentioned, police department from the CPD, it's the Charlottesville Police Department. So if there is oversight over them, it will probably have to go through the university. And right now, they don't, at the university level, they don't have a civilian oversight body. Across the country, I can tell you that there are a lot of a lot of colleges that do have a civilian oversight body. I'm actually finishing my studies at George Mason, and I'm part of a committee there where we're establishing a civilian oversight, or we're trying to establish civilian oversight at George Mason campus. So this, I think that is the kind of solution, because even in Fairfax, this Fairfax model there, the Fairfax Civilian Review Panel only has jurisdiction of Fairfax County Police, not of the city police, not of the George Mason Police, and any other police departments. So the civilian oversight body is usually attached to the jurisdiction that establishes, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have a question. I don't know if you would totally know the answer because it's kind of subjective, but obviously, ideally, there wouldn't be these instances of police using force unnecessarily. Do you think that having the board is helping prevent these things from happening just by deterring police officers from going there in the first place?
So that's actually an excellent question that is not as subjective as you might be suggesting. It is and it isn't. So for one, there isn't that much research on this. So there is a level of subjectivity to providing you a really thorough answer. But in my work and in doing research on this, I actually came across a fellow colleague that he actually did his dissertation on finding out if there's a correlation or relationship between how strong a civilian oversight body is and what solutions it can, or what impact it has on reducing these disparities in force, these disparities in arrest. And he did a survey of a national survey of civilian oversight jurisdictions. And what he found was that the stronger the civilian oversight body is, the more likely it is to reduce these disparities in force, disparities in arrest. So there is at least some evidence. And again, this is still an emerging field in terms of research, but there is at least some evidence, empirical evidence, that says that, yes, the stronger the civilian oversight body is, the more likely it is going to reduce these issues that we see. And it's for many reasons. One thing, one concept that they talk about in criminology and in social interactions is the civilizing effect. And the body worn cameras have this civilizing effect in that they, or in theory, they can make a police officer be more civil in interactions because they know that their interaction is being recorded. So there's some evidence that's suggesting that body worn cameras are having these impacts in making sure that individuals that review body worn camera, like a civilian oversight body, the police officer is going to know, well, hey, somebody's going to look at what I'm doing, so I need to be more careful. And the police department is going to be held to higher standards. So I don't know if that directly answers your question, but I appreciate the question anyway.
Yeah, thank you.
I had a question. Sorry, my camera isn't on. My Wi-Fi is very laggy, so if I turn it on, it kind of shuts everything else off. But anyways, so on the website for the committee, I guess I was looking at it earlier today. It kind of let me find it. It said that it works to. Let me find the quote. I'm sorry. It is. I'll ask my other question at this. There was a CBS news story, I guess in late November, that talked about how there were teams of people working in other major cities across the country to reform police departments, and they were training police officers to use de-escalation tactics and how to calm themselves down before using any force. If they were in a car chase or chasing after someone, then they had to wait 10 seconds or wait for backup before they continued with anything, so they wouldn't make rash decisions. So I was wondering how much influence this committee has over the police that are coming into the Charlottesville community, their training and what that would entail. If you guys just make recommendations, or if you're writing parts of the curriculum. Yeah.
Oh, that's a great question. I can't see you, and I'm really impressed by all the questions that you guys are asking. These are excellent questions. Right now, and for some time, and I don't know that it's going to change. The the Charlottesville Police Department, they send their recruits to a regional academy, the Central Shenandoah Police Training Academy, and at that or yeah, I think that's the name of it. At that regional police academy, I forget the exact number, but you have different departments from around the region training. So they get trained on basic law enforcement. How do you do an arrest? How to use force? When to use force? And just very generalized training. After that training, they come back to their respective agencies and they undergo more training. They go field training. Okay, you learned all these great tools, but now we need you to train you what it means to be a Charlottesville Police Department officer. So they have general orders, and this is when we can use force. This is when we can make arrests. This is how we make arrests. So they have to learn these things once they finish the academy. Within the powers and abilities of the board, they have the ability to make recommendations. They can look at these patterns and they can look at these practices and policies and more closely and say, hey, maybe we see a gap here in training. Let's do a survey of other jurisdictions and see what they're doing, and let's give them a strong recommendation that the Charlottesville Police Department can implement. At the end of the day, it is a recommendation, and the police department can say no to it. However, it is something that the city council will then say, wait a minute. We established this board. They did all their diligence. They gave you a strong recommendation. Why aren't you looking into it more closely? So they can kind of force the hand or make a stronger push to implementing a recommendation. And usually in my experience here, police departments are where there is civilian oversight. When they receive a recommendation that's well founded with data and well presented, they're going to want to implement that change because they don't want to have negative police interactions and negative interactions with community members. So to answer your question, the board has the ability to look at something like training issues and look at the amount of training, look at that really closely. They have the ability to audit. I actually put forth an auditing report and made recommendations. It's not I didn't actually audit anything. It was a report about what what should be audited with the police department. And hopefully it gets implemented. And then we could start looking at these things more closely.
Thanks so much.
I have a question. How are you guys like keeping up with like data and information between like having all these different like interim city chiefs? We just got a new mayor. So like how are you guys keeping up with the data from person to person?
Yes, so that institutional knowledge, institutional data is really important because a lot of things could get lost when you have so much transitions. I'm relatively new to this role in Charlottesville. I came on board in September. Some of the board members have been appointed since at least 2019. There was some turnover in there, but we're trying to make sure that we have a good historical record of these things, what's been happening since 2017, what recommendations have been made, what changes have been implemented. So we're trying to make sure that we have continuity here. These board members they don't have lifetime appointments. So at some point they're gonna roll off, and it's important that the new board members understand and know this history. Part of my role is to make sure that we're training board members into what's been done so far, what the board can do, what it should do, and provide suggestions in that regard. So part of the task here, as you're alluding to, is Ryan, is to make sure we have a good historical record and that we keep everybody accountable for these things. Hey, well, the last city manager said such and such, the last chief of police said such and such, and that we have that continuity throughout time.
Yeah, I'm just worried because, like, since 2017, when this was formed, I'm guessing a lot has changed. So I'm just like, all the information you're telling us and you're showing us, like, is this gonna stay since we now have a new mayor? Like, because our old mayor, her beliefs and her ideas were different from our new mayor. So how are we gonna promise to the community that these things will stay in place and stay the same?
Excellent question, and that's a great civic question. And the work doesn't just stop once at the booth at the when you make a vote, or it doesn't just stop when you get a policy adopted by city council. You have to have that continuous engagement with them and hold them accountable. Hold me accountable as an executive director. Hold the board accountable, making sure that the board meets once a month, the second Thursday of every month. You're all welcome to attend their public meetings. They're right now via Zoom. They're going to have their elections at tomorrow's meeting. So making sure and community members do this all the time. They go into and they bring up the issues and they hold them accountable. If the board isn't doing what they're supposed to be doing, then the community members could go directly to city council and bring up the issues there. So there's always opportunities to have this feedback to the individuals that are making these decisions. But like you're saying, I think that this is something that's a continuous discussion. And even when individuals change, I think that the values of the community should still be reflected in these actions. So just because you have a particular individual that's now mayor or part of the city council, if the community values something and they fought hard for it, then it's something that should be respected. I do want to, though, in talking about that more broadly, as we know, we're also going to have a new governor, and there's been some changes within at the state level with that, and there's actually some effort to roll back civilian oversight at the state level. So they're going to introduce some. I'm not sure that they're going to go very far, but there's efforts to to take away these powers that individuals have fought hard for. So we'll see how that goes. But again, it's a constant engagement with this process.
I have a I don't know if it's a quick question, but I was on the Youth Disproportionate Minority Contact Committee as we were reviewing, and one, like what you gave, like you said before, is a very, very simple overview. Because if you all can imagine, there are thousands of decisions that are made within the criminal justice system. There are two ways in which police are like respond to a scene. One is officer initiated contact, and the other is people calling for the police and the police arriving and going from there. But after that point, then you have, does the police arrest the person? Does the police give a ticket? Does the police give a fine? How much is the fine? How much are they, if they're arrested, then they go to a judge. What does the judge give as a sentence, right? Like how often are the people that are sentenced that are Black are sentenced to either higher bail money, more time for the same sentence as someone else, wide variety of things. Like there's a flow chart that was the size of a wall for how many decisions that are made inside the criminal justice system. And so one of the things that I learned when I was doing that is that if a person is arrested, right, and they are booked and processed inside of the jail, the Charlottesville City or the Albemarle County Regional Jail, there are two options. This is what I remember, and Mr. Aguilar, please correct me if I'm wrong. There's an option for white or Black, and then there's an option for Hispanic, non-Hispanic. And those are the options for when you are booked and processed inside of like the regional jail. And those are like the data points that they had as far as like knowing the amount of disproportionality that is people that are processed inside of the jail. Now, Hansel, is that still the same, or have they changed that or updated that?
You got me. That's a great question. I would have to look at that more closely. I don't know that answer.
Okay, because it was my understanding that that was one of the bigger points. Like whenever you do a study, you always kind of have the very end like limitations for the study, and that was one of the big limitations because let's say there are Asian people, there are Middle Eastern people, there are just a plethora of people, biracial, et cetera, that do not fall into those four very strict categories. And so I wonder, as like police civilian oversight like continues, what it will look like as far as understanding the different perspectives and different ways in which people are disproportionately contacted and disproportionately handled within the system. Because if like there are many different places in which your race, age, gender, et cetera, can be tracked. But if a place like a jail, which again does a lot of bookings for people, and that's a pretty severe sentence if you were to be sent there, it's interesting. I wanted to see more information about like, one, why is it still that way? I know the jail system is archaic in many ways, but like, why is the system still that way? And then the second, I think, is just thinking about what information are we missing, right? How many Asian people were arrested and put into jail in comparison to the population? Things that are just kind of very basic that I think that like are still kind of up in the air. I'd love to know when you all like kind of look into those systems, like what other information that we have that's missing, that maybe things that I haven't, because I'm sure the vast expression of gender identity is not, you know, listed inside of jail applications. It's like biological sex, male or female. And so you don't know how many trans people or genderqueer, gender fluid people are arrested. So there's a lot of like different things. And I'm like, wow, I didn't realize, because all that does then play into the decision points in which you can say a person, a Black male like myself, is X times more likely to be arrested if the police are called. It's X times more likely to be given like process and put in front of a judge that's going to give me this amount of bail, that will give me this amount of time if I was sentenced for anything. Like there's so many different decision points that I think when you have more information, hopefully will help to make the system a bit better, because that way you all could study, let's say there was an Asian person that was like, you know, not treated correctly by the police, then you all could say, well, then how often does this happen to Asian people, right? And right now, I don't know that we know that number.
That's an excellent point, and I'm glad you brought that up too. And even on the point of gender, I think that there's a lot of work that could be done there. In my work in DC, it's a very progressive jurisdiction, at least in paper. It's not a perfect jurisdiction like any jurisdiction, but within the general orders of the police department there, they actually address the issue of what do you do in encounters where an individual needs to be given a pat down or a search, and they may be gender non-conforming. So you don't want to obviously offend. It could be, and I'm hopefully none of you have, but if you have been searched or pat down by an officer, you know that it's a very intrusive process, and it can make you feel very uncomfortable, especially if it's somebody from your opposite sex. So one of the things that the policies should be reflected in there, how officers are coming into contact with individuals, and whether they're taking this into effect, and what steps are they making to make sure that the individual is respected and they're treated with dignity in these encounters. And in DC, they actually make an officer, if it appears that if it's not apparent what the gender expression might be of the individual, the officer is tasked with asking the individual, hey, I need to pat you down. Do you feel comfortable if I do it, or would you prefer somebody of different gender does it? And then the individual gets to make that decision. And these are kind of little things that really impact how police experience the police system.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I mean, this was incredible just to learn all about what's going on in our system, in our community, ways in which we can let other people know, like if there's a friend that you have that's gone through something and they felt they weren't treated right by the police, and say, you know, there's an outlet for that. There's a way that you can have like either a conversation, or there's a way you can like report that, basically, right? And then kind of go through the process, because I think that so often, especially with people such as police, who I think that we view as having this kind of like ultimate authority over our lives. It's hard to think that I can challenge that authority. It's hard to think that I can say, hey, that wasn't right, like what you did. And so I think that this is a really great tool that hopefully will continue to be a great tool as we enter into new politics and different ways that people view oversight of policing. So I'm very, very excited. And obviously, if you all have any questions, I'll send out the presentation as well as information for how you all, oh, will it still be PCBR? Or will it be PCOR at charlottesville.gov?
We're probably going to change it to PCOB, but either which way, there'll be some way to link you back to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so I'll send out all the information for you all. And thank you for your questions. They were really, really great questions that were insight and thoughtful and even pre-researched before we got to talk to Ms. Aguilar. So thank you for all of that. Do you all have any other questions or anything else before we sign off? I don't see anyone. I will send out an email, but we will be meeting. If this time works for you, it seems like we got a couple more people. We'll be meeting on January 26th. So the next time we'll be meeting is January 26th, Wednesday at 6 p.m. So if that works for you all, we'll keep that schedule every 2 weeks and then meeting at 6 p.m. if that still works. That works for you? Okay. Awesome. Thank you again, and a round of applause for Mr. Aguilar. Thank you. Thank you. Awesome. Well, you all have a great day. And I hope you all enjoy. I don't know if we're going to get snow. I don't know what's going to happen, but we'll see. It kind of blew us over last time. Awesome. Well, take care.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.